Good afternoon, everyone. As Dean of Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, it's my distinct privilege to welcome you to today's talk on the startup revolution, how entrepreneurs are hacking the global economy. First, I'd like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, the indigenous people upon whose ancestral lands our university now stands. I'm not sure that enough people immediately think about Maxwell and entrepreneurship together, but they should. And I want to tell you a few of our alums, and I want to tell you about what they're doing. One of our alums, a guy named Josh Aviv, he's the founder of Spark Change. It's a clean tech company. It won the 2017 New York State Business Competition, and he's a Maxwell alum. He's a 2015 grad in economics. Or Marvin Lender, for those of you who are old enough to know Lender's Bagels, he's also a Maxwell grad, 1962, political science. Or Leah Miller, she's a 2003 grad with her MPA and her Master of Arts in International Affairs. She's a career Foreign Service officer. She's worked extensively across the Middle East, North Africa, and Latin America, and she's currently working as the Cultural Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in La Paz, Bolivia, for the Department of State. Outside of her work at the department, she's the co-founder and co-CEO of an organization called Peace and Purpose, a social enterprise organization that serves as a catalyst and a launch pad for female entrepreneurs worldwide who are thinking about how to expand into new markets, grow their businesses, and in the process improve their own lives and in turn their communities. Then there's Maxwell's newest undergraduate major in citizenship and civic engagement, filled with students who are deeply dedicated to social entrepreneurship and making a difference in the lives of others and in the communities in which they live and work. The examples go on and on. The Maxwell entrepreneurship link is much tighter and closer than people might expect, because when we think of entrepreneurship, we often tend to think about schools of business. But not only does the Athenian Oath implore us, all of us at Maxwell, to leave the city greater, better, and more beautiful than we found it, but it turns out that that's a philosophy that's very consistent with most successful entrepreneurs. But the power and influence of policy and policy implementation has an enormous impact on fostering successful entrepreneurship. And I think, as you can begin to see, it's hard to disentangle policy from entrepreneurship. And I think we can all agree that there's nowhere that policy and its effects are studied more deeply and successfully than at Maxwell. Shelly Porges is our speaker today, and she understands this. And she understands the Maxwell School very well. She understands the power of entrepreneurship to even inequalities, to enhance security, and to support citizenship. Shelly's a successful serial entrepreneur, an investor, a global entrepreneurship advocate across both the public and the private sectors, domestically and internationally. She's the managing director of Reservoir Q Global, LLC. It's an advisory and investment firm. She's also the president of the North American jury for the Cartier Women's Initiative Awards, a member of the board of the Global Banking Alliance for Women. She's on the advisory board of Cornerstone Capital, and she's an expert on call at Georgetown University's entrepreneurship program. She's also served as the executive head of marketing for American Express Canada and as the chief retail marketing officer for Bank of America during a historic turnaround. But Shelly's also been a dedicated public servant as well. She served as the former senior advisor of the Global Entrepreneurship Program at the Department of State, a program she expanded to almost 150 countries under Secretary Hillary Clinton. Shelly's informed and inspired audiences globally at forums, summits, and conferences in cities and locations as diverse as Lisbon and Dublin, Stockholm and Istanbul, Dubai and Kuala Lumpur, London, Israel, Bali, and many more. She holds a bachelor's degree with honors and a master's degree from Cornell University, and we are so delighted that she traveled to Maxwell today to give this talk. Shelly, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody for being here. It's so exciting to be here at Maxwell. Actually, I'm supposed to be, I guess my mic is here. Good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's exciting to be here in Syracuse at Maxwell, and I have to give Dean Van Slyke thanks for inviting me and for persisting in finding a time on the schedule that was mutually appropriate and convenient. I have to say I was really impressed. No, you guys never dropped the ball. I also have to acknowledge, of course, my husband, who's sitting here in the front row, Rich Wilhelm, who is on the board of the Maxwell School, without whom I certainly wouldn't have been here, who's also a proud alum and very engaged with a community of Maxwell up here in Syracuse as well as in Washington, D.C., where I hope you all know that there's a Maxwell campus, a wonderful Maxwell campus down there as well. It's great for me here because this confluence of policy and entrepreneurship is at the very heart of things that I care most deeply about. So I wanted to start, though, by asking you, imagine if Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, or Steve Jobs had been born in Africa or Asia or Latin America. Do you think they would have realized their potential? Now imagine if each of these great innovators also had a sister who was equally innovative, equally determined, equally hardworking. Do you think she would have a chance to fulfill her potential? Secretary Clinton always says, talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And that's really at the heart of what we always worked on at the Global Entrepreneurship Program. And in fact, I think what so many in the room here and certainly at the Maxwell School work on, the creating opportunities for everyone as much as possible to fulfill whatever their potential might be. Now, this simple thought that we're trying to promote equal opportunity is what's really behind what we see around the world as the biggest revolution the world is seeing today and why it's so important. It's what I have always called the other revolution, and it's the global entrepreneurship revolution, or you could think of it as the startup, but it goes beyond even startups, right? Providing opportunities for millions around the world. The Global Entrepreneurship Index, which is one of the many measures of entrepreneurial activity around the world, estimates that we could be generating 7 trillion with a T, more dollars of GDP, more dollars of global productivity adding to the global economy if we simply improved entrepreneurial conditions around the world by 3%. And I'll be talking a little bit about what are these entrepreneurial conditions that we might seek to improve. How do we drive these economies? How do we create more opportunities? But let me start with a story, if I may. So you may all remember, some of you are rather young, but I hope you still remember that, just a very few years ago, sometime around the time we were having our recession here when we had the bank failures and all that, something in the Middle East and North Africa called the Arab Spring. You all remember that, I hope? Well, if you think about the Arab Spring, just 9 months after the Arab Spring happened, the Arab Spring was fundamentally, as I hope you know, an economic revolution, more even than it was initially a political revolution, because it was about young people looking for opportunity in the world. Young people, many of whom were actually educated. We have the stereotypical view sometimes that young people from that region do not have a good education, but many of them did. And even those that did were still finding that there were no jobs for them and no possibility of jobs to be created. But during that time of the Arab Revolution, or 9 months thereafter, when I was at the State Department, we decided to host a startup weekend in Alexandria, Egypt. How many of you are familiar with the notion of a startup weekend? You know about startup weekend? It's, just to describe, it's a 72-hour accelerated boot camp, if you will, that takes place over a weekend. So if you have an idea, if you're an entrepreneur, what I like to call a wantrepreneur, you have an idea, you don't yet have a business, and you're thinking, how do I test this idea, and how do I find out what it would take to start it up, you would attend a startup weekend. Well, the typical startup weekend, a startup weekend as an organization is a nonprofit. It's actually now owned by Techstars. And it functions in over 120 countries around the world. And we in the program and in the Global Entrepreneurship Program, we're lucky enough to have them as a partner. So we said, let's do a startup weekend in Alexandria. Let's start tapping this energy that the young people are bringing to this revolution, and let's see what we can create here in a positive way. And we ended up, the typical startup weekend in the US would have something like 80 to 120 applicants, maybe 60 to 80 participants. But we launched Startup Weekend in Alexandria, and we got 2,100 applicants. We got 800 in the end participating, with over 200 women, even without having done special outreach to women's communities. And it showed us what incredible desire and hunger there was for this kind of support and assistance for the local talent to realize their full potential. We were so excited when we heard that, and when we saw that response to what we were doing. Now, when you think about that, not only did we have that kind of participation, but the other happy news for me was that in the end, Startup Weekend ends up with a winner. That is, all the teams pitch, there's a judging panel, and in the end, the winner was a 6-person organization led by a woman. The other 5 were the guys. And she had this concept that the guys all decided among their 6 ideas, they liked hers best. And it was an online application and website for kids. And during the course of the weekend, they started programming it. They started working on how would we introduce that into the marketplace, how would we get it funded, et cetera, et cetera. And they won. They did the best job. At the end of it, after she won that competition, she wrote to one of Egypt's top businessmen saying, I won this competition, would you consider funding my business? No term sheets, no angel network, nothing that we usually wait for. And guess what? He said yes. He said yes. So she had that spirit that entrepreneurs have to just go out there and do it. Just try it. Just ask. He responded. He provided some funds for her to get her business started. Fast forward a little bit. She also applied for a U.S. incubation program, which she got accepted to. And the next time I encountered Sarah Galal was in Washington, D.C., when I was asked to speak to a group of rising Middle East, North African women entrepreneurs. And there I looked at the list of who was going to be in attendance at this group, and sure enough, I see Sarah Galal's name. There she is in Washington. So it's a really great story, and just one of many, many hundreds and thousands of examples we had of just providing the kinds of conditions that we're lucky enough to have in the U.S. and some other places, what it can do for a rising entrepreneur. Well, this began to drive, and this made us realize there is, in fact, another revolution going on, and it is the startup revolution. And what really is driving this is a number of things. First of all, it's the growth and it's the existence of hundreds of millions of youth around the world that see very little economic opportunity for themselves in the future. They have no jobs now, and they don't really see any emerging. And it turns out that there are actually over 1.8 billion young people ages 15 to 29, representing over about 40% of the world's population, actually over 60% in developing and in some emerging countries. So young people represent, we like to say it represents our future, but it's more than that. It represents our present. I mean, it's the majority of the population in so many countries. And the fact that we don't focus more on creating economic opportunities there is our loss, and it will impact us if we don't do more of it, which is why I think it's so critical that policymakers keep this in mind. Most are in countries that have no jobs for them, as I said, and even when they have a good education, they have no jobs. So think about those young people in Alexandria, Egypt. You can imagine, most of those were college educated. And where did they see our posters and our outreach? Where did they see it? They saw it online. They saw it at their universities, whatever. They were educated, but they still had no opportunities. Youth unemployment overall, too, is twice that of adult unemployment in most parts of the world, according to a recent report by the Commonwealth of Nations. So that's one real big trend. Unemployed youth was one of the things driving the startup revolution. The second thing is, of course, technology and the connectivity powered by technology. In 2017, over 5 billion people, or about 63% of the world's population, had cell phones. It's the first time we crossed that 5 billion mark, 5 billion out of about 7 billion people in the world. young people across the globe are actually 90% more likely to have a cell phone than a car. And that may not surprise most of you, but think about this. 80% are more likely to have a cell phone than a computer. Now that might surprise you. And 60% are more likely to have a cell phone than a job. And that is exactly the problem. 60% of this burgeoning, huge population in the world don't have jobs and no hope for it. As such, by accessing the internet via their mobile phones, these digital natives can see what's happening in some parts of the world, and they want it. They want what they see. I mean, one of the questions I often got asked when I talk about this topic is, well, what about cultural differences when you're promoting entrepreneurship in different parts of the world? And I'd say, well, yeah, there are some, but you know what? There's so many cultural similarities, especially in the younger population. So I know that some of you either come from other countries or perhaps first generation, your parents came from other countries. But think about what you know about your home country, your parents' home country. I mean, the young people there know what's going on. They know what your life is like as much as you might know what their life is like, and they want it. They want us to have the opportunities that we are lucky enough to have in most parts of America. So they see the opportunity. They want to move ahead. And finally, I think it's the growing understanding in this generation that the future is in their hands. We see a really brilliant example of that, sadly, but maybe in an encouraging way too, in the last couple of months with the Parkland young people from the high school kids in Parkland saying, enough of the adults, we're going to do it. And that's really the spirit we're seeing all over the world. They recognize that if they are going to create a future, they have to do it themselves. That, as I like to joke, Prince Charming isn't coming. We are Prince Charming, So where do we stand now, and why haven't we made more progress if you have these billions and we've known about this for so long? Because when you think about the realization that this possibilities in their hands is both inspiring and intoxicating at the same time. So you'd think that we'd be further along. Well, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is both the largest and the longest longitudinal survey of entrepreneurship in the world, there are over 400 million entrepreneurs globally. About 163 million of them are women, early-stage entrepreneurs, and about 165 million are young early-stage entrepreneurs ranging from about 18 to 36 years of age. So there is progress there. This is the beginning of the revolution, but it's only the beginning because there's more work to be done, and this is where policymakers come in. These businesses, by the way, have created over tens of millions of jobs, with 65 million entrepreneurs by this GEM survey saying that they're planning on creating 20 or more jobs in the next 5 years. So do that math and understand what the power is here. It's not just the power of these young people creating their, starting their companies and creating their own personal economic opportunities. It's the opportunities they're also creating for others potentially. And 65 million believe that they're offering innovative products or services that are new to the market. And still, with high unemployment, it's clear that more is needed. So what can we do to accelerate their progress? In my former role at the U.S. State Department, we set out to accelerate and foster the entrepreneurial ecosystems to drive change. So the way we approached it was not so much that we're going to go fund this one, or that one. It was more about working with our embassies and consulates around the world to develop and, first of all, identify and understand what the drivers were for a productive and supportive ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And then it was to help connect them to the partnerships that we had developed that would help them realize those visions. So we did this by leveraging 4 things. As I mentioned, first, our vast network, almost 200 embassies and consulates around the world who are not just our arms, our arms, ears, legs, whatever on the ground to get the job done, not only from a business point of view, what I think of them as call it retail distribution, how we offered our program up, but really very importantly also our cultural intermediaries. These were the folks who had an understanding, what did this country or these communities need? What should be the priorities in the country? What were the cultural barriers and other barriers to entry? how could we really get the jobs done best? So leveraging this vast network of embassies and consulates was key. That's part one. Then it was also our more than 100 public-private partnerships that we had with organizations ranging from NGOs to universities to corporations, a whole array of organizations. The third thing was the many other resources offered by the US government, most notably, for example, an example of that would be the SBA, the Small Business Administration, which has domestically many business development centers and other sort of what you might call incubators, but they also had mechanisms and approaches to funding and supporting businesses that we could take around the world and train people around and actually help countries build their own SBAs. And last, and certainly not least, technology. Deploying technology was key for us, as it would be for any initiative. But before we did that, we needed to answer we had to answer a few key questions in terms of what can policy foster, how can policy foster the ecosystems. And the first is, what do entrepreneurs need? What do they need? Just thinking simply about that. Secondly is, what do the women need? Oftentimes, the women need, every business needs some core things the same, but women, for cultural and other reasons, often need other things that sometimes a male-founded business will not need. Third, what can we provide to accelerate realizing the potential for all? And what were they capable of creating in the end once we would provide this? And importantly, and we just came from a very interesting conversation around data analytics and measuring impact. What impact could we expect at the end? And so those were the things that the questions we were looking to answer. So the challenges were real, but the answers were in the end heartening. So what do they need? What we realized is entrepreneurs really need, obviously they need lots of things, but at the heart of it, you could call it the 4 C's. They need a community, they need a connectivity, they need a culture, and they needed capital. Let me talk about a community for a second. Name me an entrepreneur who's been successful, and I'll find you the village that spawned her and her idea. No one succeeds without having others around them who help them get there. You may be the one who has the great idea, and you may think you're the smartest person in the room, but believe me, it's going to take a whole team of people, probably a whole village of people, to get you to where you want to go. And as we recently have been talking, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. Because you may be brilliant at X, Y, or Z, but there are going to be people who are smarter than you at other things. So if you're an expert marketer, well, somebody is going to be a better technologist. If you're a great technologist, somebody else is going to be a better finance person. If you're brilliant at finance, then somebody else is going to have something else to offer you that you don't have on your own. So community is essential for entrepreneurs. No entrepreneur is an island, and the larger and more active the community or network that exists to support innovation, the faster that entrepreneur will thrive. So again, come back to it. Imagine if Steve Jobs had tried to do what he did, and I think you're all fairly familiar with the Apple story, right? How he started Apple. Of course, it was in Silicon Valley. And he was a young guy with a friend of his, the other Steve, as they call him. And he, it was one thing to have the idea, but it was another thing that he had a technology partner who he could easily draw from that community, because there were 1 million of them there. 2, he had some people he could go to say, hey, I have this idea about a computer. Would you give me $100,000 to get the first one started? Now, in those days, today we know what Apple's become, the most valuable company in the universe, but that wasn't evident then. But there were plenty of people willing to take bets on ideas like that and young people like that. So whether the community serves as a source of ideas, as a marketplace, as a team to build a company, or as entree to funding the entrepreneur's community is key to her or his success. It's one reason why we encourage startup founders to build their networks, to to find their communities. And it's so wonderful. I just this afternoon had an opportunity to go visit. I don't know how many of you have seen the Blackstone Launchpad. Hope you're familiar with it. It's in the library nearby here. And it's a fantastic initiative because it gives not just entrepreneurs, not only young people who've already started their businesses, but what I like to call the wantrepreneurs. Those, if you have an idea and you think it might be good opportunity to start a business, that's the place to go. And you've got it right here, like a stone's throw away. How wonderful is that? You've got your community here. And that's one of several entrepreneurship hubs here at Syracuse. So I really, think it's such an exciting time and such an exciting place to be doing this. The second point here is connectivity, and I'm sure that you as the connected generation won't be surprised to hear that. Not every startup is a tech company, but of course in this day and age, they're all tech-enabled. Almost anywhere in the world, they're tech-enabled. Whether that's a farmer's cell phone to check marketplace prices in real time, and engines to save on fuel, or a drug to eliminate disease. And all are powered by the connections to others in their field and in their markets. Thus, the key role of connectivity plays in every entrepreneur's success. The third area is culture. We don't often talk about culture, but culture is essential. And when you work around the world, you really see it powerfully because it's clear that some cultures are more supportive than others of entrepreneurs. What defines these cultures? Well, most importantly, the willingness to allow children and young people to try new things and fail. I mean, it seems like, well, duh, of course, fail without life-changing consequences, life-changing negative consequences. I'm not sure you know this, but in some parts of the world, if you started a business and it didn't work out, and at the end you weren't able to pay your suppliers, unlike here in the US where we have bankruptcy laws where, it's not something anyone chooses to do or have, it's not something we encourage, but if it happens, there is a way to work out debts that you can't pay for and still live to see another day, still live to start another business. Well, in many countries of the world, if you can't pay your suppliers or someone you've bought something from, you could go to jail. I mean, that's the end. That's it. It's over. And you can imagine there are very low rates of entrepreneurship in those kinds of countries because who wants to risk that? Even if you're looking for a job or an economic opportunity, it's too big a risk. So, culture is important. Most importantly, the willingness to allow people to fail. And beyond that, the openness to new ideas and the understanding that while we may honor our traditions, new circumstances require new approaches to even old problems. So we're not talking about ignoring traditions of cultures that importantly hold our communities together. But what we're talking about is working with our old traditions to find new ways to address problems, that old and new problems. And last but certainly not least, no one will be surprised to hear that capital is one of the key things that entrepreneurs need. Capital, or the need for resources to underwrite the growing business. And here we're not speaking just of venture capital, which is where our minds tend to jump to. We say capital, we think venture capital. Well, it's well known that women only get 3% of venture capital, but even only 11% of male-founded businesses either get venture capital. So venture is really the domain of very few businesses. What we need to be focused on is the fact that there's a full spectrum of funding options before we ever get to thinking about venture. The first of which, of course, often for an entrepreneur is their own resources, right? Their own savings, a credit card they may have, or even their time. When we talk about sweat equity and we talk about you spending your time as you start your business, your time is valuable. Your time is worth something. That is an investment in your business. So start with that, your own capital, if you will. Moving to the next, I think the most important source of capital, which is customer revenues. There's nothing more powerful, nothing more important than you generating customer revenues as a source of capital for your business. Even if in the future you want to go get a bank loan, you want to create a crowdfunding campaign, or you want to go to an investor, the most powerful thing you can do is to demonstrate not only do I have a cool idea, I've lined up customers. I've got customers. I've got paying customers. I've got people who've bought my product or service or whatever, or signed up for my subscription, or who've done whatever they've done, to demonstrate that there's real demand, not just in my head, not just in the research, but actually in the real world. So driving revenues and funding a company through customer revenues is critical. Beyond that, of course, loans from friends and family. Sometimes we say friends, family, and fools. or investments from them, applying to grants and competitions. One of my, the dean mentioned my involvement with the Cartier Women's Initiative Awards. The Cartier Women's Initiative Awards is the largest business plan competition for women in the whole world. We identify women from 6 regions of the world, and we give, every year, we give over $1 million of awards to women innovators who win our business plan competition. And it's 6 women 6 laureates from 6 regions of the world. One each for each region gets $100,000, and then 2 of the finalists who from each region also get $30,000 each. So it's really compelling. If you know women innovators, 1 to 3-year-old businesses, often with traction already, but not necessarily, who are innovative, who are creating impact, tell them about the Cartier Women's Initiative Awards. And beyond grants and competitions, how many of you have heard about crowdfunding or are familiar with the concept of crowdfunding? You all are. It sounds like virtually you all are. Crowdfunding is a great option. There are different kinds of crowdfunding options. It's not always easy to do. It's certainly not easy to generate traction. There are a number of things you have to do to make it successful. But the beauty of it is it's there for you to test and to tap. And last but not least are things like angel investors and eventually, if you're so lucky, venture investors, right? VCs. So think about it when you think about capital. When we think about capital, those are the things that we're thinking about. So, and then when we looked at women, what did women need that was above and beyond what we were talking about there? Because often, to be successful at serving entire populations, we really had to do special outreach to women and often special programming. And why I appreciate that over half this room are men, but I hope that you all appreciate that when we support women entrepreneurs or when we support women differentially from the male entrepreneurs out there, it serves all of us. It serves all of us. None of our communities and our economies can really be fully successful if we don't support all. And I also want to comment, of course, minority populations also sometimes need differential support just because of lack of access. But in any case, the kind of things we found that women needed are what I might call the 4 M's: mobility, mentorship, money, and markets. Mobility, you know, my husband does a lot of work, has recently done a lot of work in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, so it's gotten me focused a little bit on that culture. But it's really not only Saudi women who cannot drive who are limited in their mobility. It's often other things that limit women's mobility and prevents them from really realizing their full potential. Things like family responsibilities, physical danger in their locations where if they leave some near area around their homes or their villages causes them to be exposed to danger. Or inadequate facilities sometimes that in cultures where women and men stay separate often limit a woman's mobility and therefore her full potential to be an entrepreneur. Now, happily, often mobile technology can help her overcome these challenges. So we find that in many of these communities, women will be working from home over their computers, over their cell phones, and still able to undertake and start and grow businesses. But it is one of the issues that we have to overcome. Mentorship is another factor that policymakers need to think about. In most societies, even in developed countries, women see few role models to help them envision the possibilities as an entrepreneur. And as the saying goes, you really can't be what you can't see. And if you don't have the role models, they're standing there somewhere in the magazines, on TV, wherever you might see them. Where would you get this idea that you too could be the entrepreneur? Providing mentorship from both successful women and men can help overcome this. Money. Well, we talked about capital. And as with all founders of early stage companies, money is a challenge. And you won't be surprised to hear, though, that in most countries, not only do women earn less than men for the same jobs, but they have less opportunity to get those jobs in the first place, and they have less access to material resources of any kind, whether that's inheritance from their families, whether it's land ownership, or ability to get a loan or other financing. So even over and above what we know to be some limitations of women economically, these things are factors that we as policymakers need to consider. Laws in some countries are changing as policymakers begin to recognize the vast potential for the economies that women represent. Research also offers some hope as more and more funders begin to recognize that when you lend to or invest in women, you're in good company. And new data shows that women are better borrowers. They repay at much higher rates than men. They're also good investments, generating higher returns than male on early stage companies. Now, there's a limited amount of research around that, but the early research around that shows that. So you have fewer unicorns that are women founded, but you, broadly speaking, you get the returns. Where there's been research done, that it's demonstrated that women give higher returns. And I'll mention something else that's not in my notes here, but it's one of my favorite talking points, which is that one of the exciting things going on right now, it's exciting for women anyway, and I think it should be for everybody, but we are living through one of the greatest transfers of wealth we will be seeing in our lifetimes. In the US alone, there's $30 trillion of wealth that's going to be passing from essentially the boomer generation to the millennial generation. And of that, women are expected to be the recipients of about 70%. Why? Why wouldn't it be 50-50, as you might expect? Because first of all, you have usually boomer men who predeceased their wives, leaving money to boomer women. And then you have the parents leaving money to their children. And I recognize that this isn't the case for everybody in our society, but it is a reflection of big changes afoot, where women will be controlling a much bigger part of our economy, a much bigger part of our wealth than they ever have before. And I believe, based on research that shows that women are more mission-driven in their investments, they're more mission-driven in terms of their purchasing, that we will see some changes around that. And that will create opportunities for all entrepreneurs. If you know these statistics and you see the things happening. One area that will create opportunities, and another statistic related to that, is that of those women receiving some of that wealth, over 60% changed the financial advisor that their husbands or father used within 12 to 14 months. Imagine that. A whole industry could be changed within 12 to 14 months because of these changes going on. I was with the head of wealth management for JP Morgan in November at the Summit for the Global Banking Alliance for Women, and I cited these statistics and I said, is this true? And if so, what are you doing about it? Because if I were in your shoes, I don't know. And she said, no, it is true. We're seeing it right before our eyes and we're quaking in our boots. And I'm thinking, I hope you're doing more than quaking in your boots, but okay, good. And she said, but seriously, she said, here are the things we're doing. First of all, we're trying to train the wealth managers that they have to do more. They have to pay attention to the wives before the husband passes. They have to answer the questions. They have to be responsive to the requests and interests and so forth. And then, of course, they have to often engage the women. Something like 26% of women don't engage in their own finances until a life change like that happens. So it happens on both sides that things need to change. But again, if you're an entrepreneur and you see big, huge changes of capital flows, you must look at that and think, what's the opportunity there for me? So I think that will lead to big changes. And then finally, markets. Through programs like our African Women's Entrepreneurship Program at the State Department, we encouraged women to participate in the many beneficial trade agreements we had provided. We found that when we did an assessment of the trade agreements that the U.S. has with many countries, in this case, in Africa, we have something called AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, that provides free trade across thousands of products and services in 41 sub-Saharan African countries. And we found that the vast majority of it was being used by big corporations. And secondly, when it came to smaller businesses, it was male-owned businesses that women were almost not at all partaking of. So simply raising awareness about the benefits of accessing different markets with these trade agreements. And we also brought in a partner called We Connect International, which certifies women-owned businesses to do business with large global corporations that have committed to procuring from women-founded businesses. So these were some of the things that we did and some of the things we had to watch out for when we considered what special challenges do women have. And finally, what did we give them? Well, it was our goal to teach these entrepreneurs to fish, not to give them fish. So it wasn't really about providing things. It was about providing opportunities. And as such, we tried to provide 3 T's: tools, technology, and teachers to help them succeed. Through many public-private partnerships, we were able to provide them with tools like business model, templates, guides to resources that they could use to improve their skills, and actually publicity through our embassies and consulates that supported our program. Technology like cell phones, computers, and related training. Turns out that just as there's a gender gap on virtually every other aspect of the economy, there was a huge gender gap in mobile cell phone ownership in the developing and emerging markets. And we did some partnerships. We had a program called M Women, where we got some major global providers of cell phones to help us start narrowing that and set as a goal the narrowing of that mobility gap. We also did it through partnerships with companies like Intel, Google for entrepreneurs, Microsoft, who not only provided the equipment, but then a lot of the training that went with it. And then finally, teachers. Teachers through many of the fine academic institutions that we partnered with, like MIT and Babson, accelerated programs like Startup Cup and 500 Startups, corporations like ExxonMobil and Goldman Sachs' 10,000 Women program, where they helped us fund programs for women, and NGOs like Vital Voices and Junior Achievement. So again, there were things that we did to facilitate what the entrepreneurs needed. And here's where the happy news comes. What did they create? What do we see on the other end of this kind of cycle here? What we saw was so exciting. Tens of thousands we touched globally did what true entrepreneurs do. They made lemonade out of the lemons. They made lemonade out of every other thing, too, which is they took whatever they got and really turned it into lots of good things. They turned it into ideas, innovation, income, and inspiration. Now, in terms of ideas, all human beings on this earth, even children, are problem solvers. Many develop solutions that can be shared with others, and a small minority figures out how to turn that solution into a sustainable business. By encouraging the almost 150 countries we worked in, we saw thousands of ideas turned into real innovations and then into commercial enterprises. In terms of innovation, these ideas, when embedded in so many of the startups and growth companies we dealt with, were true innovations that improved people's lives, whether by creating jobs like microfinance did, solving a big problem like feeding the hungry, or housing of homeless, or simply massively improving whatever already existed, like a better way to grow grain or to educate more children. As far as incomes, we considered that to be as much of an innovation as any for the reasons I've already mentioned. As importantly, these innovations generated incomes and jobs and lifted people up. Some of the great businesses that were created by the entrepreneurs touched by our program included a heart monitor to provide advance warning of a heart attack developed by a young innovator whose father had died because no such device existed. Another great innovation was developed by a woman in Africa. It was a 3-pound bag with a special filter that filtered water so that anyone, anywhere, had access to clean water, even if in their area the only access they had was to brackish or dirty or otherwise polluted water. She was able to sell it to villages, to NGOs and others. She was able to create networks of other women to sell it in their villages, and creating a virtual cycle of economic benefit, and others serving water-challenged communities. So these were just a few of the very many ideas we saw across the board. And as importantly, in the end, they all provided inspiration. Because these entrepreneurs, with their very ingenuity, their determination, their optimism, inspired not only us, but no surprise, others in their communities. Others who saw that they saw a problem and they solved it and they created a business out of it. And they became the role models for the rest of their communities and countries. So it's hard not to feel hopeful for the world when you realize that most of the people do, in fact, want to do better to make this world a better place for all of us, not just for their small circle. And in the end, let's talk about what really matters. I just came out of this results tracking meeting. What did we see? we did see results. We saw tremendous encouraging results. We grew our program, first of all, to almost 150 countries. The mere fact of being able to engage with that many countries on this topic was itself progress. We saw entrepreneurial activity explode once a country became aware of the benefits. We saw changes in laws, in funds made available for entrepreneurs, and even in cultures to accept the key role that these innovators play in the economy were evident as we tracked our engagement from a few dozen experiences to literally thousands of activities and hundreds of thousands of new enterprises globally. And the rewards were significant, too, in other ways, in that startups in all sectors, not just tech, were being supported. This included agriculture, it included which is the largest sector in many countries, tourism, manufacturing, retail, and so many other sectors. By promoting entrepreneurship, what I always considered the best part of the American brand, we were able to advance the national security agenda, too, more effectively through public diplomacy and actual economic gains. We helped create some more stable environments for lots and lots of people. Our entrepreneurship program stood out as among the most positive of the economic support efforts we provided around the world. Because when you think about what a foreign service officer often has the job of doing, or the conversations that they're having, I often call them sort of bad news conversations. They're conversations about things like IP protection / you're stealing our stuff. Or there's conversations about good governance / you guys are corrupt. Or there are conversations about sanctions / you guys did something else wrong and we're going to take something away from you. Whereas when you came with the entrepreneurship agenda, it's like, we have something really positive to offer. You have talent that hasn't been fully realized, and we want to work together to help unleash that talent. So you can imagine that the program actually for our teeny tiny office was incredibly popular around the world, and is one of the few programs that have sustained not only after Hillary Clinton left and after Barack Obama left, but actually exists now. Some of you may have heard that Ivanka Trump led a global entrepreneurship summit in India. The Global Entrepreneurship Summit was our program. We worked with the White House for years. We started in 2010 with President Obama's first presidential summit on entrepreneurship, and then took it to Istanbul, Dubai, Kuala Lumpur, Nairobi, Marrakesh, and many other countries over the years to grow it. And last but not least, yes, the rewards were there. Our entrepreneurship program stood out, but most importantly, the result has been nothing short of a revolution. One of the most significant findings in the GEM survey was the steady increase of total entrepreneurial activity across all economic levels, despite a worldwide economic struggle following the Great Recession of 2009. So over the period that we were running this, and I'm not taking credit and saying we caused it to happen, I'm just saying I'm proud that I believe that we did materially contribute to the expansion of and growth of entrepreneurship across the globe. Countries in all three categories that GEM studied, whether they were developing countries, emerging markets, or developed countries, saw an average increase of 22 to 36% in total entrepreneurial activity. It's an index that's comprised of number of startups, number of jobs created, and capital available for early stage companies, among other factors. Many of these economies, like China, Argentina, and Chile, already had high rates of entrepreneurial activity and saw further increases. So, as one of my favorite artists, John Lennon, once said, "You say you want a revolution? Well, we all want to change the world. But entrepreneurship is a revolution, will continue to change the world in ways that we can only imagine today. And will help us address what I said earlier. Hillary always said, it will help us address how we create opportunity for talent that is universal." Thank you.
Shelly, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Q&A?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
So we have opportunity and some time for some Q&A. We just ask that there are a couple of microphones. We'd ask that you stand and ask your question so that folks on the live stream would be able to hear. Okay? Any questions? Well, there must be one.
Maybe I could break the ice. Oh, do I have it here? So, okay. Maybe I could break the ice by asking you a question. So how many of you are entrepreneurs? Just a couple of you. How many of you know entrepreneurs? Most of you. How many of you expect that you will be working in some policy area that will touch entrepreneurs? Anybody? So some of you are here just for pure academic and intellectual curiosity. I'm impressed. Thank you. Anyway, when you know the entrepreneurs, what is it that strikes you most? Does anybody want to comment on what it is that, as you know, the entrepreneurs in your life, what strikes you most about them? There's no single right answer to this, by the way. I'm just curious. This is my curiosity, trying to learn from you. Somebody up here?
Mainly,
there's a microphone here.
Eccentricity and fearlessness. They're more go-getters than other people who plan and think too much before they take the step to go out and try to start a business or something. For someone like me, I tend to think too much and, oh, will I be able to do it or not? Rather, my father, who's an entrepreneur, and he just straight went into starting his own business. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So you see them as being, I think you said eccentricity and fearlessness.
Yeah.
And just going for it and really believing it. I think you're right. I think there's definitely an element of that that happens. You might be surprised to hear there have been a number of conversations with really successful entrepreneurs asking them about that very point, about how, did you ever consider the risks that you might face, when you did this? And surprisingly, some of them said, yes, I did. And what I thought about was this, and this is perhaps good for all of us to think about, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that can happen if I went forward with this? Is it life-threatening? Probably not. Am I going to lose my life savings? Maybe. It depends on how you approach it. What is the worst? Are my children or somebody close to me, are they going to be hurt by it? Or am I going to be hurt by it? And so what was interesting, I'm like you, because I have always thought that entrepreneurs were like, oh, man. When I was a student, when I was in the corporate side, I too thought, well, I'm never going to get into this, because I would always overthink, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about that? But what they said is they did think about that, but they thought about it in terms of what's the worst that can happen. So, some of them may not be as fearless as we would tend to think, but I think it's a good point. They certainly seem to be. Over here?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. Really great question. You talked about the differential supports that women and minorities often need. And so in particular, when you were talking about funding sources, you named personal finances, and very often these are two groups that oftentimes don't have the funding from personal to support their endeavors. Can you talk about what differential supports you've seen to be very successful with addressing women and minorities who are launching businesses?
Yeah, so I think the most successful things I've seen have to do with, first of all, community-based sources of funding. In Washington, D.C., we have a new organization. We have a woman mayor. She's wonderful, Muriel Bowser. And a year ago, she was approached by a group of minority women saying, we don't have access, in our communities, we don't have access to resources that other people do. And she started supporting the development of incubators and encouraging investors to look at some really great opportunities. I myself judged a competition in an area called Anacostia, which is Ward 8 in our community, which is mostly lower income. And the winner was a black woman who was a high school teacher. And she had this brilliant, innovative, individualized testing technology that she had developed. Individualized testing is a very big, apparently, growing paradigm in the educational reform world as to understanding how we can understand, how we can help kids better. And she's done really well. So, but through that competition that she won that competition. She found investors. She found coaches. I've been coaching her. I've been mentoring her. But there were other people there as well. So I think bringing a community around the opportunity to identify new talent, new opportunities for is key. I think that's one of the key areas.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I just have one question. There's this big debate about whether or not entrepreneurs are born or are made, and obviously there's a lot of incentives now, the governments, a lot of policies from a lot of governments to encourage more entrepreneurial activities. So I was wondering, what's your opinion on whether or not policies is enough to create entrepreneurs from a community, or is our successful policies simply a supplement to communities that already have a strong entrepreneurial culture, or individuals who already have sort of their own entrepreneurial desires or experiences? Whether or not policy itself is enough to create entrepreneurs that are successful.
Yeah, I don't think policy creates entrepreneurs. I think there's a seed of entrepreneurialism in all of us in the sense that we're problem solvers. Entrepreneurs, the best entrepreneurs, are problem solvers. You know the story of Uber, how Uber came about. So Travis Kalanick, the founder, was standing on a corner with a friend, trying to flag down a cab in San Francisco. Now, San Francisco is not like New York. It's not a cab on every corner and whatever. So they're hanging there. The weather's getting bad. And they're thinking, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could just like touch our phones and a car would show up, and even if we didn't have money on us, no problem, because we had an account that was linked to our Venmo or to our credit card or whatever. That's how it started. And then they looked at each other and said, why not? We could do this. That's doable. And that's how it started. So linking back to the idea of risk, and when we think now back on the evolution of Uber and all the things that they've faced and the policy, whatever. But it started with the kernel of an idea about solving a problem. So I don't think policy creates entrepreneurs. I think policy, though, can foster entrepreneurship in the ways that I was talking about, in that, Travis Kalanick had already had two or three companies before then. So he already got the whole process. He had connections to funders when he decided. He had connections to technologies. He himself was a tech guy. So he had all the means at his disposal to realize his idea and the problem solved, and to test it, and then to see whether or not it could be really a business. Lots of people don't have those access, which is why I said the community is important, the networks are important, access to tech people. Look, in Washington, D.C., one of our weaknesses is the tech community. There are a lot of tech people in Northern Virginia who work on security. They've been government contractors, they've done whatever. So we do have that part of the tech community. But when you look at the young entrepreneurs at our universities, whether it's Georgetown, where I work with some people, George Washington, others, there are no engineering schools there. At Georgetown, we have a computer science minor. University of Maryland, which is a couple of hours away, has a big engineering school. But it is actually one of our weaknesses, because when I talk to the students and they say, I have this cool idea for do you know where I could connect with? Now, these days, the gig economy is such that you can get online and you can find technologists who can help you develop it. But I'm saying it's not going to be your college roommate. And that is a weakness, I think, of our ecosystem, that we don't have that technologists embedded with the history majors and the policy majors who have their ideas to help execute on that. So it's the conditions, and the policymakers, the role of the policymakers is to help create the conditions that it's kind of like gardening. You don't create the flower or the plant, but it takes certain conditions in the soil for that flower plant to grow. It won't grow without the policy, in other words.
Thank you for your comments. In the United States, there's a program called the SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research Program. And there are both grant and contract agencies. And in the contract agencies, for the most part, all of those contract agencies are looking for women as part of them. And most often, those set-asides for women and also African Americans are not met. So thinking about how can we get more women into science and technology to start moving, because that's where a lot of those SBIR projects are going in true innovation. So do you have any thoughts about how we can start to move women into those areas that move into higher value jobs?
I mean, broadly speaking, I think things like role models is critical, and that we provide. I'll never forget the day I picked my son up one day from his second level computer science class in high school. This was years ago. And walked into the classroom, and there wasn't a girl there. There was not a single girl in that classroom. And I was so shocked, and even though it was going to make me late for the doctor's appointment, I marched into the principal's office and I said, what's going on here? where are the girls, you know? And we started looking about, you know, what would it take to recruit the girls? You know, how would we present it in a way that is interesting and appealing to girls? And a lot of that work has been done. On a higher level, I'm proud to say, I just came yesterday from Cornell, which is my alma mater. And at Cornell, which has a top 10 engineering school, you might know, they have, for the first time ever this year, after years and years of working on this very issue, have their first entering class that's 51% female in the engineering school. So it can be done. And they worked very intentionally on it. Now, they weren't going for 51%. They just want to make sure that they were tapping as much talent from women as they were from the men. That was their goal. And in the process, so I think, I mean, I'm sad to say I don't know more about it at this point, but I think that would be, if you're really interested in that topic, looking at what they've done and how they got there. Because I do know that they worked on it for a long time to find, you know, to diversify their student base in the engineering school. That was a key goal of theirs, and you know, they've reached some of their goal there anyway. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Hi, thank you so much. Follow-up, I think, on those last two questions is, so as young people that are very interested in the policy process, but also just how, at the community level, and especially as young women, do you have any advice of how we can be that community for fellow women entrepreneurs?
Sure. Well, first of all, start with the labs you have here. You already have these great hubs here, and you know, you can certainly start your own community, but you can do it within the context of the hub, because why not leverage the resources that have already been assembled for you? I mean, it's so wonderful to be at a school where you've got not just one hub. You can pick your hubs. If you don't like what you get in one hub, go to another one. You know, it's incredible. It's quite incredible, actually. I mean, I go all over, and usually, most universities are proud to have one hub. The fact that you've got the launch pad here, and you've got, you know, other ones in some of the different schools. And they're all open, as my understanding is what I've been told, is not just to the students in their college, but also to others. So, but you know, start as, you know, have a potluck dinner and you know, share resources, talk about who you know and what you know. I mean, it's really very basic, right? Connecting with people you know and connecting people you know to other people you know. There's nothing more important than that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. We have refreshments. We hope folks will stay. And also, students who are interested, Shelly is doing a career talk for us tomorrow from 11:30 to 1 in Maxwell Hall 204B. So I encourage any students who'd like to talk further about careers in entrepreneurship or perhaps in the public or private sector to come in and talk to Shelly further tomorrow. But we have time to talk over refreshments now as well. Thank you.